Hello, welcome to Biology, the scientific study of life. Observations of natural selection. Observation 1. For any species, population sizes would increase exponentially if all individuals that are born reproduce successfully. Observation 2. Nonetheless, populations tend to remain stable in size except for seasonal fluctuations. Observation 3. Resources are limited. Inference 1. A production of more individuals than the environment can support leads to a struggle for existence among individuals of a population with only a fraction of their offspring surviving each generation. Observation 4. Members of a population vary extensively in their characteristics. No two individuals are exactly alike. Observation 5. Much of this variation is heritable. Inference 2. Survival depends in part on inherited traits. Individuals whose inherited traits give them a high probability of surviving and reproducing in a given environment have higher fitness and are likely to leave more offspring than less fit individuals. Inference 3. This unequal ability of individuals to survive and reproduce will lead to a gradual change in a population with favorable characteristics accumulating over generations. Darwin perceived an important connection between natural selection, which results from what he called the struggle for existence, and the capacity of organisms to reproduce. Apparently, this insight came after he read a 1798 essay on population growth by Thomas Malthus. Malthus contended that much of human suffering, disease, famine, homelessness, and war was the inescapable consequences of human population's potential to increase faster than food and other resources. The capacity of overreproduce seems to be characteristic of all species. Notice this figure. Of the many eggs-laid young-born species breed, only a tiny fraction complete their development and have offspring of their own. The rest are eaten, starved, diseased, unmated, or unable to reproduce for some other reason. In each generation, environmental factors filter heritable variations, favoring some over others. Organisms with the trees favored by the environment tend to produce more offspring than the organisms without those trees. This differential reproductive success results in favored trait being disproportionality. Disproportionality represented in the next generation increases in the frequencies of favored traits in a population, which are always taking place regardless of whether the environment is changing, are an important sources of evolutionary modification. Artificial selection. Darwin derived another piece of his theory from the many familiar examples of selective breeding of domesticated plants and animals. Humans have modified other species over many generations by selecting and breeding individuals that possesses desired traits, a process called artificial selection. As a result of artificial selection, crop plants and animals bred as livestock or pets often bear little resemblance of their wild ancestors. And if artificial selection can achieve so much change in a relatively short period of time, Darwin reasoned then what he termed natural selection should be capable of considerable modification of species over hundreds or thousands of generations, even if the advantages of some heritable traits over others are slight. The advantageous variations will gradually accumulate in the population, and less favorable variations will diminish. summary of natural selection. Let's one more state the main ideas of natural selection. Natural selection is the differential success in reproduction among individuals that vary in their heritable traits. These reproductive differences emerge as each individual interacts with its environment. Over time, natural selection can increase the adaptation of organisms to their environment. If an environment changes over time, or if individuals of a particular species move to a new environment, natural selection may result in adaptation to these new conditions, sometimes giving rise to new species in the process. Before continuing, we need to emphasize three subtle but important points about evolution by natural selection. The first is that although natural selection occurs through interactions between individual organisms and their environment, individuals do not evolve. A population is the smallest unit that can evolve. For now, we will define a population as a group of interbreeding individuals belonging to a particular species and sharing a common geographic area. Evolution can be measured by only as changes in relatively proportions of heritable variations in a population over a succession of generations. Another key point is that natural selection can amplify or diminish only heritable traits, that is, traits that are passed from organisms to their offspring. Though an organism may become modified through its own interactions with the environment during its lifetime, and these acquired characteristics may even adapt the organism to its environment. There is no evidence that such acquired characteristics can be inherited by offspring. We must distinguish between adaptations that an organism acquires during its lifetime and inherited adaptations that accumulate in a population over many generations as a result of natural selection. Third, remember that environmental factors vary from place to place and from time to time. A trait that is favorable in one situation may be useless in different circumstances. Natural selection is always operating, but which traits are favored depends on the environment. Thus, Darwin envisioned life as evolving through this gradual accumulation of small changes. He postulated that natural selection operating in varying contexts over vast spans of times, as revealed by the emerging science of geology, could account for the entire diversity of life. Back to a stick mentioned in Africa, to this flower, a flower mentioned in Mali. Notice the differences place here. Notice also this example of adaptation, evolutionary of adaptation. Related species of the insect called notice this one, mantoids, have diverse shapes and colors that evolved in different environments. This example of adaptation, notice that. Back to overproduction of spring. Just one branch of a maple tree bears dozens of winged seeds. If all the trees of spring survived, we would quickly be over. Notice this example also. Variation in a population, to the extent that the variation in color and not patterns among the members of this population can be acted on by natural selection. Notice the differences here. And artificial selection also, these vegetables have all been selected from one species of wild mustard. By selecting variations in different parts of the plant, breeders have obtained these divergent results. Notice these are differences. All these, this is the origin. Descent with modification. This is the tree, or this evolutionary tree of the elephants is based mainly on fossils, their anatomy, order of appearance in strata, and geographic distribution. Note that most of the branches of descent ended in extinction, despite their very different appearances. The manatees and hyraxes are the elephant's closest living relatives. Timeline here. Notice this one. Okay, thanks for listening.